This is really insightful analysis, and I totally agree. But I'm going to be totally honest. My note for this went in a totally different direction. It's something that triggers me, okay? I talked about this in the last episode, actually, but it grosses me out when they describe flesh as meat. So when it said, and as the dead meat rained down, thudding on the castle grounds, I was literally fighting for my life, okay? I was like, no. If there's going to be more descriptions like that, I don't know if I'm going to make it.
Welcome back to the Booktown Fantasy Podcast.
I'm Addison.
I'm Lorraine, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. We have a very exciting set of chapters this week that had us on the edge of our seats. What will happen to Astrid the 13? Who are these Mycenaeans? And what's going on with Brandon's temple and Ilium? There's so many exciting developments, and we can't wait to talk about it. As a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters 6 through 12 specifically, but there will definitely be spoilers for all the books we've covered so far. This includes The Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, and Queen of Shadows. Otherwise, the series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. Our next Empire of Storms episode will cover chapters 13 through 20. Next, if you need to fill the time between our Empire of Storms episodes, then definitely check out our Onyx Storm coverage. Or if you want to revisit the past with a nostalgic book, then we have launched our very first Paging the Past book review covering The Hunger Games. And our next one at the end of this month will cover the second book in the series, Catching Fire. Our Paging the Past episodes will basically be like monthly book reviews to revisit some of our favorite series from the past, like Harry Potter, Twilight, and more.
Also, just a heads up, I am a little under the weather, so if my voice sounds a little funny, I apologize. And if this is your first time listening, I promise I do not always sound like this. I usually sound much, much better. We also have gotten a few more positive ratings and reviews, and it was kind of funny because I was showing my husband the review because I show him every single one, oftentimes more than once. I was just gushing over how nice it was, and I realized something, and that is that we have the best listeners. I mean, obviously,
yes.
Duh. But by that I mean our listeners, y'all are smart as hell. The review you guys write are so well written, and of course, we appreciate anyone that takes the time to write a review, whether it's really short or lengthy. Like, just love you guys. But you guys sit down and you guys type a paragraph. Like, you're ready to go. And it's like the grammar, the punctuation, the word choices. They're chef's kiss, okay? They're really, really good. And I'm just proud because you guys are so smart. You're probably much smarter and much better writers than Lorraine and I. You should see all the typos in our notes. They're hilarious. I mean, that's our
Absolutely.
99% of our bloopers come from is because we can't spell.
Or we can't speak.
Or we can't speak. But in all seriousness, thank you guys, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much. It truly makes our day whenever we get to see these reviews and stuff come in. And it's just a little ray of sunshine for us. And we do this for you guys. So we're glad you like it. All right. So that is all for housekeeping. And now let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report for chapter summaries, and then we will dive into an analysis and offer theories for each chapter. And finally, we will share our favorite moments. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
With vibrating excitement. I love this set of chapters. Chapter 6. Dorian Haviliard was now the king of Otterlin. He had always known he would one day be king, but he had not expected to inherit a shattered throne and a vacant stronghold. Dorian tried to adjust to life after he'd broken free of the Vogue Prince's influence and the Wordstone Collar. After he and Aelin had shattered the glass castle, but he hated being alone and he loathed that he had been weak. Dorian winced at the ungodly amount of paperwork he had to do and prepared to begin, when suddenly he heard the boom of thunder. Only it wasn't thunder. It was the sound of the wings of wyvern. Spreading into the distance was a horde of wyvern bearing armed witches. The city began screaming. Manon and her 13 had flown for 2 days straight without rest in hopes of reaching the city before that bitch Isker Yellowlegs did. But they were too late. The attack had begun. Manon hoped she had not been too late in one regard, and that she knew what the hell she was doing. Chapter 7. Dorian rallied his magic, willing it to obey, summoning ice and wind to his palm, letting it build. He let the witches and their wyverns draw closer, and when Dorian could see their iron teeth as they grinned, he unleashed a torrent of magic so strong that it shredded them into pieces. Dorian struck the next wave down, their bodies coated with ice so thick they shattered on impact. But Dorian was not prepared for the next attack to launch behind him. A Yellowlegs witch and her wyvern had clawed a giant gaping hole in Dorian's tower and now stood between him and the door. He was so close to escaping, he knew he'd only have one shot, and so he released a torrent of ice right into the wyvern's face and sprinted for the door. He almost made it, but was smacked against the wall by the wyvern's poisonous barbed tail. With only his magic keeping him alive, Dorian tried to stand, but his body would not obey. The Yellowlegs witch grinned at him and prepared to dismount, but the witch never made it to the ground. Her head was gone. Dorian knew her face before he remembered her name. It was Manon Blackbeak, snarling at him to get up. Shit. Manon Blackbeak was in deep shit. She commanded Dorian to rise so that he could escape. She'd forgotten how much taller he was, and some ancient predatory part of her awoke at his half-smile. She urged him to leave, to flee. Manon didn't know what to do when the 4 Yellowleg sentinels rushed in. She couldn't risk word that she'd been spotted with him spreading, but Manon didn't have to decide, because the tattooed and silver-haired Fey male appeared and slaughtered them in an instant. Then, the air in Manon's throat choked away into nothing. It was only the king shouting for Rowan to stop that saved her. Dorian said, "Find me when you change your mind, Blackbeak." And then the king was gone. Chapter 8. Rowan had flown without food or water or rest for 2 days, and he was still too late. He'd seen enough cities fall over the centuries to know that Rifthold was done for. But thank the gods he had reached the king in time. Dorian and Rowan made their way through the castle to a secret tunnel entrance in the queen's chambers. Rowan used his magic to check the path ahead, and they quickly made their way to a sewer entrance where they found a boat tied along the banks of the Avery River. Rowan quickly got Dorian into the boat and shifted. Rowan flew overhead as the boat sailed along the river. Rowan looked back only once as he flew high above the boat. Only once. He thought about Aelin, his queen, and what the city had meant to her and what was between them. It was not mere lust or even just love. This thing between them, the force of it, could devour worlds. But this was war, and these lands would endure far worse in the coming days and months. Chapter 9. For 3 days, Alid Locken had been hunted. By the 3rd day, she was close to weeping just from pure exhaustion. She quickly stopped to refill her canteen, but stopped dead in her tracks when she heard the first howl. The only thing that rivaled in filling her with dread and terror was the warrior crouched across the stream with a long, wicked knife balanced on his knee. He told her unless she wanted to be lynched, she'd better go with him. A small, ancient voice whispered in her ear that she'd at last found her relentless hunter, and now they'd both become someone else's prey. Lorcan told Alid to run, and so she did. It took Lorcan only a few moments to catch up to her as he flung a net of his power behind him, but the beast that chased them cracked his shield of magic, something Lorcan didn't even believe was possible. He told Alid to keep running while he prepared to face what chased them. Even Lorcan, who had been alive for 5 centuries and had seen untold horrors, was not prepared for what faced him. Monstrosities. 4 of them. They called themselves the Ilken. Lorcan moved swiftly, nearly beheading one with his hatchet and landing daggers to the hilt in the skulls of the other 2. He prepared to face the last one when the 2 behind it began reviving. They told Lorcan they would prolong his suffering for coming in between them and their prey, and he bluffed, pretending he would help them capture her if only to discover what her value was to Erewhon. As if in answer, a scream shattered from the forest behind him. Chapter 10. And the Oscar for Best Actress goes to Alid Locken. Alid faced the Ilken, and using nothing but her wits, she managed to escape by channeling her inner Manon Blackbeak. Hell yeah. But afterwards, she immediately began vomiting. So, kind of balances out. Lorcan caught up with Alid, and after giving her a small cut on her arm and seeing that her blood ran red, he decided he could trust her, at least as far as he could throw her, which for Lorcan was actually probably pretty far. After running for quite some time, they eventually stopped to rest, and in exchange for a tin of healing salve from Dornell, Alid tells Lorcan of her time in Morath. They agree to stick together for now. Alid will give Lorcan information on Morath's inner workings, and Lorcan will keep Alid safe. And so, they began their journey. Chapter 11. Manon Blackbeak landed in Morath ready to start slitting throats. And the aftermath of the attack on Rifthold, Iskra Yellowlegs had accused her of being a witch killer, and now Manon was walking into her trial. It was rare that all three matrons gathered to met out justice, and Manon knew she was in serious trouble, and so she lied, believing the stories she told them. When she was finished, it was Petra who came to her aid and defended Manon. Petra's defense worked, and Manon was spared. But she was spared only at the expense of her second. Instead, Astrid was to pay the blood debt between the clans. She would die at sunrise tomorrow. Chapter 12. Aelin, Aedion, and Lysandra made their way across the lowlands of Terrasen until they reached the coastal city of Ilium. The city was under Adarlanian occupation, courtesy of the Lord of Mea, Roland Haviliard's father. But Aelin had no intention of leaving this town the way she found it. She was going to liberate them. The three checked into an inn, and once in their room, Aedion tried to convince Aelin of the practicality of what they were about to do. But Aelin disagreed. Ilium was important for a dozen different reasons, including the historical Mycenaeans and their sea dragons, as well as the king's flower that only bloomed for the blessed monarchs of Terrasen. Aelin knew symbols had power, and this place was about as symbolically important as could be, and so they prepared, starting with a meal. They should probably eat before they raise hell. And that concludes the book report.
Ooh. Well, thank you so much for that excellent book report. And without further ado, let's get into our analysis. And of course, per usual, we have our overarching thoughts to start us off.
All I have to say is this was such an exciting set of chapters. I was immediately hooked. Everything with Dorian and Manon just had me on the edge of my seat, and I loved every minute of it. And then when we switched to Olene and Lorcan and everything that happens with the Elkin, and that had me in a literal chokehold of panic. And then by the time we got to Manon's trial and Astrid's punishment, I was literally close to vomiting and screaming into the void. And then you hit me with the Mycenaeans and their sea dragons, and I was basically comatose. Okay, I was done for. There was a lot of highs and lows and just really exciting information. Honestly, I know a lot of people say Queen of Shadows is their favorite book in the series, but so far, just based on the first dozen chapters, I am leaning heavily in favor of Empire of Storms. I am really into it.
I agree with that. I mean, we hit the ground running in this book. There's no lag, there's no chillaxing, no enjoying some time in Terrasen again. They're like, nah, we got a war to go fight. So
I'm actually really relieved that we did Onyx Storm after Queen of Shadows, because I think if we had done Empire of Storms, there's no way. I would have been like, no, I'm so sorry. Like, we can't stop. Won't stop.
It just gets better and better with each book. Every book, we're like, oh, this one's the next favorite. But like, you keep reading and it's just like, oh, no, actually, this one is now. But yeah, I totally agree. Honestly, the witches stole the show for me in this set of chapters. Manon's actions to save Dorian, the tension that you see between the covens, and then just all the emotional rage I felt towards Granny B for her shitty decision about Astrid. I'm so mad about that. And we'll talk about it for sure, because we both have thoughts on this.
A lot of thoughts.
But in general, especially for this set of chapters, I'm just so invested in the 13 and their story arc. And y'all also know I love Dorian. So getting the romantic tension with Manon and Dorian also just makes it one of my favorite storylines to follow right now. And then, of course, as you said as well, what we learned in chapter 12 about the Mycenaeans had me pumped because, I don't know, it's just exciting to get more world building details. And then this lore about a new ancient group of people that have disappeared, but they're probably going to come back.
Hey, disappeared, not dead. They're just hiding somewhere. I have some thoughts about where we're going to find them. I know they're going to come back up. I know it.
We haven't seen their bodies, so...
That's right. That's a rule of this podcast. That's right.
All right. So that ends our overarching thoughts. And let's get into the chapters, starting with chapter 6. We kick off this set of chapters from Dorian's perspective, who is still struggling with the aftermath of his father's death and the extreme silence of the stone castle, which I think is also symbolic of how lonely Dorian is right now. All of his closest friends are gone on their own missions. His favorite guards are all dead, and even his mother and brother are still residing in their mountain residence in Ararat under orders from him to actually stay there.
First and foremost, R.I.P. Rest in Prolo. Never forget. Honestly, of all the characters, Rest probably would have been my husband because had a nice, decent job, and he was kind of funny and cute, and so... I don't know why, but I feel like my book husband died. My realistic book husband.
I was going to say, I thought Kale was your real.
Oh, obviously. No, 100%. Well, and you have Adian, he's in the running too.
So your backup husband is what you're saying.
My realistic, real world husband, yeah, probably would have been Ress. So, Second, the whole situation has to be absolutely soul-crushing. He went from being imprisoned with a wordstone collar, which is a special kind of hell, and he was made to commit unspeakable atrocities. And then poor Dorian, he finally gets freed, learns his father was not really his father, and then everyone he's ever known and loved leaves him. And it just makes me so sad for Dorian. But I will say, and I know we've only gotten a couple of Dorian's POVs, but I'm liking this new Dorian. I don't like that he's had this trauma, but I feel like there's this undercurrent of strength and resolution, and he's really going to transform very similarly to how Aelin did in Heir of Fire. I'm here for the new Dorian. I'm loving it.
Oh, he's always been there. I think he was just too scared to do anything, or he didn't quite know what to do, but now he's moving more into action-based plan moving forward. So I agree. I'm excited to see where his story takes him.
With Mana and Blackbeak, that's for sure.
I thought it was interesting Dorian doesn't want his mother and brother to come back. A, because he feels guilty for destroying the castle and killing the King of Waterland, his father. And B, because it'd mean having to continue, quote, lying about what his father had been. The demon that had dwelled inside him, a demon that had reproduced with his mother not once, but twice. While we haven't gotten explicit text stating, yes, Dorian is Valg, it's pretty heavily implied Dorian is part Valg since his father was controlled by one when he was conceived. This also makes it clear Holland is likely part Valg as well. But we have yet to really learn much about Holland, aside from him being a brat riding in his little gold carriage.
Don't forget that he's rotund. That's one of my favorite descriptions of him.
Based off the descriptions, it seems Dorian's magic is likely more closely related to the ancient, otherworldly power the Valg have, or possibly even related to the magic of the word. However, I do wonder if because he also has magic from Elena's lineage, whose power we know was gifted by Mala, that makes Dorian's magic both really powerful but also distinct in the sense that he may have a really broad range of magical capabilities. So far, he's survived being possessed by a Valg, and he's always been able to use his magic when magic was suppressed. So I'm really curious to see how this plays out for his power, but also just in terms of his importance to possibly defeating the Valg as well.
I totally agree. I cannot wait to see the spectrum of Dorian's magic and what he can do with it. I said this a while back, and I cannot remember the specific episode, but I still think at this time Dorian's power is going to be needed to put the word keys back in the word gate. We learned in Heir of Fire that the keys can't be destroyed, they can only be hidden, like what Brandon did, or put back in the word gate, which of course begs the side question, why didn't Brandon just put them back? And I suspect it has something to do with the power and magic it would require. So I do wonder if it's going to have something to do with Dorian. And the last thing I'll say about this for now, I keep thinking about the description at the end of Queen of Shadows of how Aelin and Dorian's power melded together. And I still think about the way it was phrased. They joined hands, so the world ended and the next one began. They were infinite. They were the beginning and the ending. They were eternity. And I don't know about you, but that sounds very, I'm powerful enough to fuck around with the word gates to me. You know what I'm saying?
True,
and so maybe
fair,
it's, we've had this continuing conversation about why now? Why is Erewhon weighted? And it feels like all the players in the unfinished game have all converged to this singular point in time. And so I really do wonder if part of it is because something about Dorian and Aelin's power combined gives them this special set of circumstances or something. And so I'm of the opinion at this time that it will have something to do with the word keys and the word gate.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about him necessarily being involved with the word keys or the word gates, but that'd be really cool if this does turn out to be the case. So we'll keep our eyes on it. I can't imagine all the feelings Dorian must be feeling as he thinks about what his father had done to him and Kale, but I thought it was important that he thinks maybe his father had been the stronger man in the end, the better man. Not that he'd ever had a chance to know him as a man, as a human. The King of Waterland did so many awful things, but once we learned he was possessed by a Valg, it totally reframed everything he'd done over the past 19 years. I think now that Dorian knows the truth, it will likely help him grieve and accept everything that's happened. Ultimately, the King of Otterlin made choices that he thought would best help his children and other magic wielders, even if it was still a horrible choice. But in his brain, it was the lesser of two evils, I guess.
It's very clear based on this chapter that Dorian has some serious PTSD. I had the exact same quote pulled out, and it's just so sad to think about how all this time Dorian thought his father was this great, terrible monster, and in reality, what control his father did have, he used to try and stop the Volg inside of him and to protect Dorian. So then you have this double whammy of devastation, right? I feel like he's working through this, trying to separate the man from the Volg and the actions. And I imagine that would be really difficult because it wasn't like he had 10 good years with his father and so he had positive memories. I think the Volg infected the king before Dorian was born. Yeah. And so Dorian literally never got to know his father as a man, which is echoed by the quote that you shared. Another quote that stood out to me in relation to Dorian's character development that I think we're going to continue to see throughout the book is how much this time being trapped in the Wordstone Collar changed him. I sort of spoke to this earlier, but he thinks never again would he be weak and useless and frightened. And I think this really shows that Dorian is going to do anything and everything in his power to fight back. And I am so ready for Dorian to unleash his magic and whoop some Volg ass. I'm here for it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same. I also found it notable that there is still a pale ring on Dorian's neck where the word collar had been that hasn't returned to its usual skin tone. I think this is symbolic of both a reminder of what Dorian experienced, but I also wonder if it's some sort of magical marker to signify a connection between whatever magic was used to make the word collars and then how it affected or changed Dorian in some way.
I'm not sure about the magical element, but in a way, it does remind me of Aelin's scars that she bears on her back from her time in the salt mines of Endovir. It's a reminder of what they went through, but more importantly, what they overcame. And so I wonder if that will be a continual reminder and a motivator for his character growth.
Dorian receives news that Morath was stirring, but before even spotting the wyverns, Dorian feels his magic roil in his veins, automatically in response to the threat. The magic often reacts instinctively against his will, and this aligns with how we know anyone with magic has to be taught how to control it, or they can easily end up in a situation where the magic turns on them and consumes them instead. This is especially important for Dorian, I think, considering how powerful his magic seems to be. Next, we briefly switch to Manon's POV, and she and the 13 reach Rifthold, and she is pissed that the attack had begun without her. Iskra wanted the victory for herself. Never trust a Yellowlegs witch.
It was funny because when I was listening to this and it got to the part where she was thinking Manon had no doubt the Yellowlegs heir had received orders to yield, but only once Manon arrived, and then Manon thinks, bitch. I said bitch at the same time that Manon did, because I listened to audiobooks, so I'm not reading it ahead, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, that bitch. I was like, oh my God, me and Manon. This is probably the only thing we have in common.
Oh, that's really funny. And it's so fitting, because she really is, Iskra.
Iskra sucks. She sucks.
Anyways, interestingly, rather than attack the city, Manon and Abraxos head for the stone castle, and it says, quote, she hoped she had not been too late in one regard, and that she knew what the hell she was doing. This is definitely some quick foreshadowing that Manon is first and foremost concerned for the princeling.
The last thing I want to note about this very brief POV is it says, the screams reached them soon enough, her red cape became a millstone. This is such a quick line, but I think it's really symbolically representative of Manon's character arc. The red cape has been used to signify her viciousness and dedication to killing Kraken witches, and it was something that made her proud, but ever since Granny B had her kill that Kraken witch back in Heir of Fire, and the Kraken witch told her, they have made you into monsters, made Manon, and we feel sorry for you. I think now the red cape is like a weight, or as Manon describes, a millstone, something that weighs her down. And we'll talk about this more when we get there, but I think Manon does not feel good about the attack on Rifthold and all of the innocent people being brutally murdered. And I think that's a continual display of Manon's character evolution.
Yes, I totally agree. There's a lot of dissonance going on, I think, right now, as she uncovers more of the truth of everything going on with Erewhon, and then just continuing to notice the brutality of the witches and her heart, her growing heart.
I know. Manon's like the Grinch. Her heart keeps growing.
Yeah. All right, so that ends chapter 6. Moving on to chapter 7. We jump straight into the wyvern attack. And first of all, I love Dorian for his decision to fight back against the wyvern. I know that's also really risky because Dorian needs to stay alive to lead Otterlin, but overall, I thought this scene was just really cool. It says, Dorian rallied his magic, willing it to obey, summoning ice and wind to his palm, letting it build. And then just as the wyverns and witches get close, he shreds them with ice and wind. And then I also love that he forms his power into, quote, like a two-pronged whip that slices the wyvern and witches. For barely knowing anything about his power, it's kind of crazy that Dorian is able to shape his power in so many different ways already, even if it's still in this uncontrolled state. I feel like that was something that took Aelin at least a week or two to master back in Heir of Fire.
I also took notice of how it describes how he instinctively knows to tunnel down into his magic and draw it up. And this is something Rowan had to teach Aelin back in Heir of Fire. It seems to me, based on the description here, that Dorian has some natural talent in his magic usage. And I literally cannot wait to see him train and use it. I'm just so pumped for that. I mean, my assumption based at the end of this set of chapters is that he's going to be with Rowan and eventually Aelin. And so I think between the two of them, they're going to help train him, is what I think.
Yeah, at least to some extent, or like what they can. I also thought it was really important to note Dorian thinks he'd killed while enslaved, but never of his own free will. Dorian still feels an immense amount of guilt for the deaths he'd been a part of while being controlled by the Valg. I think there is something acutely terrifying about being forced to do these awful things without having any agency over those actions and to literally just be used purely as a weapon. I think it also demonstrates Dorian's reservations about having magic and using it. Magic is so completely new to him, and so far every experience that he's had with it has primarily been for really terrible things. But I think we will continue to see Dorian go through this journey of accepting his power and also realizing that he has a very great responsibility to use it for good rather than bad, just like we saw Aelin experience and go through in her own way throughout Heir of Fire.
This is really insightful analysis, and I totally agree. But I'm going to be totally honest. My note for this went in a totally different direction. It's something that triggers me, okay? After he kills the wyvern and the witches, the description literally triggered me. When I tell y'all, I almost had to quit listening. I talked about this in the last episode, actually, but it grosses me the fuck out when they describe flesh as meat. So when it said, and as the dead meat rained down, thudding on the castle grounds, I was literally fighting for my life, okay? I was like, no, I do not do well with that. Literally so disgusting to me. If there's going to be more descriptions like that, I don't know if I'm going to make it, guys. So
I have a feeling there's going to be more, so prepare yourself.
Oh, it's
you better sit with
gross.
a barf bag next to you for good
Oh my
measure.
God.
Like the airplanes.
Maybe someone can read ahead and black that out of my book for me. It's a no for me. Hard no.
As Dorian unleashes his power, we see this balance between power and control come into play when Dorian wishes he'd ask Aelin to teach him something, as well as when it says his magic moaned, spiraling down and up at the same time, dragging him into its icy eddies. It seems like he's using his power kind of like a sprinter with short bursts of power, but right now he doesn't have the endurance or control to continue using it for long periods of time. And we see that he's easily exhausted after two big uses of his magic. I think the description clearly shows that at this point, the magic mostly controls Dorian right now.
I think this is something that will get better with practice. It seems like anyone with a significant amount of power had to learn the balance of drawing it up, expending it, and repeating the process during the battle. And so I feel like he'll get better, but he definitely desperately needs to be trained.
Dorian manages to take out several of the wyvern and witches, but another wyvern attack against his tower sends Dorian flying, spared only by his magic shielding him from the falling rocks. A yellow legs witch stands in the gaping hole, and Dorian has no magic left, having used it too quickly. In a last-ditch effort to escape, he flings ice into the yellow legs wyvern's eye and then sprints for the stairwell. But he wasn't fast enough to avoid the wyvern's tail, which slams into him. I thought it was interesting that wyvern have poisonous venom on their tails, but Dorian's magic once again helps him, and it says his magic devoured the venom that should have killed him. A raging torrent of light fighting with all its considerable force against that greenish darkness. So light was used to describe the power Dorian and Aelin used together in Queen of Shadows toward the end. But I think it's interesting that Dorian's magic individually is described as light because despite Dorian being part Balg, his magic seems to fight against any sort of dark magic.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. You're right, because you would think since his lineage is Valg and probably his magic has some Valg origins, there would be some, pushback, fighting dark magic. I don't know. That's interesting. I'm going to have to sit with that, but that's a good point.
It did kind of make me wonder if Dorian is also divinely connected somehow to the gods, like maybe Mala as well, even if the type of power he has is not the same as Mala and Aelin's. There's something about describing it as light that opposes the dark that I think may connect it to the divine or the larger fate of the word or something, rather than being related to the darker, corrupted power that the Valg have.
I actually had this thought earlier when you mentioned that Dorian is a descendant of Elena and Gavin. We know from the Nightfall chapter that despite Elena being the daughter of Mala, she also did not inherit fire power, but instead a nimble and variable gift of magic. I wonder if she and Dorian have similar gifts, that Elena's magic was really raw magic that could be shaped into ice, wind, healing magic, etc., and that is what Dorian has inherited.
Yeah, I wondered about that too. I feel like still at this time there is some Valg influence, but I don't know. I kind of go back and forth on it. I'm not entirely sure because there's been descriptions of them both being described as raw magic, but I feel like I keep thinking about how Dorian is part Valg. I don't know. I think I'm contradicting myself because on one hand I'm like, oh, it's light. Maybe it's tied to the divine. Well, Elena's magic came from the divine, but then I'm still kind of like, I don't know if it's quite the same, even though logically the statements would indicate that they are.
I think it's something we need more answers about, and maybe when he's being trained, we'll learn some more.
Anyways, the Yellow-Leg Sentinel tries to make a move toward Dorian, but before she can get there, she's beheaded by none other than the Witchling, Manon Blackbeak, while Abraxos slams the other wyvern off the tower. After removing her helmet, Dorian instantly recognizes the white hair like moonlight on water, knew the burnt gold eyes, knew that impossibly beautiful face full of cold bloodlust and wicked cunning. And I got very excited because I was like, ooh, the fate of love is working its magic.
Retweet. I love this. I love all of this. Something about Manon and Dorian, man, we'll talk about it. They're just electric. There's just something about them that just, woo! They jump off the page.
We change to Manon's perspective and rewind in time to just before she'd killed the Yellow Legs Witch. Manon immediately thinks, shit, as she enters the tower, and I think she's worried about a couple things. One, I think she was afraid that she'd been too late to help Dorian. And two, even if it was the right thing to do, killing the Yellow-Leg Sentinel is going to be really fucking bad for her if anyone finds out. And we see that the witches do find out and confront her about it later in chapter 11. Another little side note, of course. Shout out to Abraxos. We love him. Abraxos doesn't think twice about attacking the other wyvern, and Manon thinks Abraxos had not balked at the fight. He had not yielded. Her warrior-hearted wyvern.
I absolutely love that description. Something about when she says her warrior-hearted wyvern, that just really touched me. I loved it.
No.
And I love Abraxos. And I'm just saying, I think Abraxos deserves a little more than an extra ration of meat, okay? Take him on a little excursion, maybe to see a field of some flowers.
Yes.
He deserves a whole day, not just some extra meat. He did a good job, and I'm proud of him.
Yeah. Having beheaded the Yellow Legs out of pure instinct, Manon then urges Dorian to get up, but she immediately takes note of the fact that Dorian was still alive, and this had to be from magic. Only the strongest magic could have kept him from death. We get the best callback to Manon and Dorian's first interaction in Queen of Shadows when he tells her, "Hello, witchling." But even better is that it says some ancient predatory part of her awoke at the half smile. And then Manon responds, "Hello, princeling." Oh, I don't know, something about the hello princeling, hello witchling.
You eat that up. You
I
love it.
do, and I was like, I might love this more than Fireheart.
Really? That was a real, genuine gasp of shock. What?
Fireheart is just cute, but Hello Princeling and Hello Witchling it's got that tension,
Oh,
a little bit
okay.
of the spice, you know? Yeah.
Well, I genuinely shocked to hear that, but I kind of get it. I know I just said this like 30 seconds ago, but I don't care. It's true. Manon and Dorian, their chemistry is electric. Every time I anticipate they're going to have a scene together again, I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. Like, I literally get so excited. Now I'm kind of
Yeah.
like, how long are they going to be separated? Because I want them in the same vicinity again, immediately.
Yes. Anyways, more importantly, I think there is definitely some sort of deeper connection brewing between them, especially when it's described as an ancient predatory part of her reacting to him. And I'm like, are we getting some more fate working its magic on their relationship here? I think so. Unfortunately, their little moment is interrupted again by the continued conflict outside. More wyvern approach as Manon urges Dorian to leave, but it's noted that, quote, a mighty wind buffeted the wyvern and rider away from the tower. And this mighty wind is clearly thanks to Rowan, and we know he's arrived to help.
I was so excited when I read that. As soon as I heard the word wind, I was like, Rowan! I was so excited.
That's, I don't know if that's what a hawk sounds
That's
like.
absolutely not what it sounds like. Not even a little bit. It's a screechy sound. I'll put it in there for you guys. Don't worry.
Dorian asks her why she was letting him go, and Manon provides a rare answer and warning by revealing Parrington is, quote, a demon in a mortal body, and plans to unleash a huge attack to cast you, Dorian, as the enemy. She also adds, rally your forces before he is given a chance to grow his numbers to unconquerable size. He means to take the whole of Aurelia. Dorian immediately recognizes the significance of her actions and warning because he asks her to, quote, fight with us now against him. This all, of course, continues to feed into the larger change we've seen in Manon. She doesn't trust Erewhon for sure, but she also doesn't really trust any of the other witches and their agenda anymore either, outside of her 13. I also think this continues to foreshadow an eventual breaking off we'll see from Manon, and I truly do think she's going to fully change alliances at some point soon.
Agreed. And honestly, based on how this set of chapters ends, I think it might be in the very next episode. Or I guess the next time we revisit Manon's storyline. Because ain't no way Manon is going to let Astrid be executed. Especially because Manon knows what she did. And she is not going to let Astrid die for her. There's no way.
I agree. Rowan's wind continues blasting around the castle, and Manon notes how she recognized the familiar strange scent of pine and snow, describing it as ancient and clever and cruel. We know Rowan already has a really strong Fae lineage, having descended from Mora's line, while Aylin's Ash River side descends from Mab's line. And Mab, Mora, and Maeve are like the three original Fae sister queens. We know that before Mab was immortalized into a goddess and renamed Deanna, Lady of the Hunt, by Maeve, there was an original goddess named Deanna who was a sister and eternal rival to Mala. The original Deanna was known as the Keeper of the Moon. I wonder if Rowan is possibly blessed by this original Keeper of the Moon Deanna in some way. It would make sense that as a god-blessed and powerful character like Aylin, she would find her balance and share a Karanon bond with someone who is also perhaps divinely linked and powerful. Just something to think about that's not confirmed. I would need more background on Rowan to lock that theory down, but I like thinking about the gods and their powers to everybody.
Well, if you guys did not listen to our Honest Storm coverage, you don't know, but if you did, you know this is Lorraine's thing, okay? I pray for her that the gods come up more in this book, just so she can be happy. I want that for you.
I hope so. Yeah, we'll see. But anyways, also, speaking of Mab being immortalized as Deanna, Lady of the Hunt, that means that Aylin is blessed or touched by two gods, essentially. She has Mala and then the recent Deanna/Mab, which is quite interesting. Manon continues shoving Dorian to run, stating, you owe me a life debt, King of Otterlin. Prepare yourself for the day I come to claim it. But she was equally perplexed by his lack of hustle. Manon asks, do you not know death when you see it? And she is struck emotionally when Dorian responds, I have seen death and worse. The death you'd offer is kind compared to that. I really like the parallel in storylines and the journey this line draws. Manon has already discovered this in terms of people possessed by the vow and her experience thinking about Kaltain and that scene when they first used Kaltain's shadow fire on that village of people. And I think that was the first time Manon had the thought where she's like, oh, a death would be a mercy, I think, right?
Yeah.
But I think it was especially notable for Dorian to state it because it highlights Dorian's personal humanity while also touching on Manon's developing humanity and compassion.
Damn, girl. Yes, retweet. Yes, just copy and paste what Lorraine said and add it to mine. That was way better than what I had written. Oh my God, wow. See, I told you.
Written, and
same thing.
Today.
Ratting. I mean, truly, it's just a reminder of how incredibly horrific it was for Dorian when he's trapped in the collar. It's sad to read. It's sad to get these reminders of what it was like for him.
Dorian begins slowly descending just as Yellowlegs witches burst through the door below. But before they can cause trouble, Rowan Whitethorn bursts through behind them, killing them all instantly. This was also obviously very lucky for Manon, in that those Yellowlegs couldn't be witnesses to what she'd done.
Hella lucky. So freaking lucky. I was stressing so hard during this scene. I didn't think anyone important would die, but I was really worried about the other witches finding out what Manon did, which they essentially did. I mean, thankfully, no eyewitness statements, but...
Right.
Ooh, I was stressing. hard.
Rowan turns his magic on Manon and begins to choke the air out of her, vowing he'd kill her for what she tried to do to his queen. Fortunately for Manon, again, Dorian vouches for her and Rowan frees her. We get some interesting information about witch magic at this point when Rowan thinks her kind had no magical shield against attacks like that. Only when most desperate, most enraged could a witch summon the core of magic in her, with devastating consequences. Even the most bloodthirsty and soulless of them only whispered of that act. The yielding. This is really intriguing to me because we don't know much about the type of magic the witches possess at this point. But this context seems to indicate that witches do have magic, but it mostly lays dormant and can really only be summoned in times of extreme desperation or emotion. It seems like it's kind of more of this explosive and deadly thing rather than something that can be consistently wielded like we see the Fae or with Dorian or other magic wielders. I would also assume that the devastating consequences part basically means that for a witch to do the yielding or harness it would also mean it would kill them in the process.
I agree. It kind of sounds like they basically just have this huge burst of magical energy and power and almost self-implode is how
right.
It really intensely it sounds. Honestly, as soon as I read this made my ears perk up so fast. I was like, huh? What? Tell me more. I hadn't really thought about it until this moment, but we really basically know nothing about witch magic other than the fact that they're really strong and fast and they can fly on their brooms. But other than that, we have yet to see them display any real magical abilities. So this was really interesting to read because I'm like, yeah, they are magic, but they don't really do anything magical. Not in the way like Rowan does. Like Rowan will make things float to him, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But 100% I feel like we're going to see the witches, whether it be Manon or Aster and any of the 13, engage in the yielding. Honestly, I'm a doomsday prepper in these books, but I'm really afraid there's going to be this big battle with Erewhon or something, and all the 13 are just going to go out in a big bang or something. I don't know. Or one of them, some of them, I don't know. But I'm very concerned.
Yeah, as soon as this was mentioned, I wondered the same thing. I was like, oh, are we going to see one of the witches that we have been introduced to do that in the future? I hope it's not one of the 13, but...
I don't feel very good right now. And it's not because I'm
sick.
Either.
I don't I don't want to think about it.
Nope.
But actually... I did start to wonder, what if Lady Kaltain's lineage and magic was actually tied to having witch blood, sort of like Elise? And that's why when Manon confronts Kaltain about her shadow fire in chapter 31 of Queen of Shadows, Kaltain said, "From me, it has always been there, asleep, and now it has been awoken, shaped anew." And then I was thinking maybe her final act in Morath, what Kaltain really did was harness the yielding and caused the whole explosion in Morath and then subsequently her own death as well.
Ooh, that's so interesting. I don't care if that's not right. That's canon for me. Absolutely. That's what happened. That was the yielding 100%. I love it.
I hate
Don't
that we'll
care if she's not a
never
witch.
know.
When I think about Keltane, I still get hung up on, like, she had firepower. So is she also a descendant of Mala? Like, how did she get firepower? Everything about Keltane is a
Right.
big mystery to me.
I
So
agree with that.
all the possibilities are on the table. Unfortunately, we're never going to know. I mean, no one's
I
going
know
to
because
tell
she's already
us.
dead.
I know. Damn it. I told you not to sleep on Lady Keltane. I told all of y'all.
Never.
Well, this is canon for me and I love it. Chef's kiss. Check.
Before Dorian and Rowan disappear, Dorian tells Manon, "Find me when you change your mind, Blackbeak." And I was like, ooh, I'm sure she will.
Hot. Super hot. Just kidding. Well, not really. I'm not kidding at all. I feel like every interaction between Manon and Dorian is hot. I'm just going to say it. It's charged.
Yes.
This, I don't know if it's like sexual tension yet, but there's like this, I don't know, this feral energy, and I love it.
It's flirty for sure.
Oh, heck yeah.
All right, so that ends chapter 7. Moving on to chapter 8. We change to Rowan's perspective as they rush to get the fuck out of the castle, despite his exhaustion from flying 2 days without rest or food and water. Rowan had, quote, seen enough cities fall over the centuries to know that this one was done for, and as tough as it was to leave its people to fight on their own, Rowan had one order given to him by his queen. Erewhon and the witches had agreed to sack the city enough to instill fear and bring down the wall as a warning to the people, but Riftwood seems like it was completely trashed. And now I'm kind of wondering if that was actually Erewhon's plan the whole time. He didn't care to let it rebuild because at this point he's just ready to start his war anyway, so why bother letting it stand? I don't know. I just wonder what the plan really was here. I don't think the people of Rifthold are going to believe that Duke Parrington and the witches are liberators at this point, you know? So.
Oh, yeah. All that conversation that Manon and Erewhon and Vernon had, I'm like, where was that? Because I feel like that totally went out the window. The way it's described from Rowan's perspective, it's like they're basically burning it to the ground. I mean, there's literally going to be nothing and no one left. So it doesn't really seem like that's going to make other territories super excited to stand with Erewhon.
Right.
You know, if they do, I feel like it'll be out of fear that he will do that. You know, so I wasn't really sure what the strategy was here.
Yeah.
Honestly, the witches, I think they just went crazy. They're like sharks.
Probably.
They got a little taste of blood and they just got lost in their bloodlust and they were just done for. Honestly.
Those freaking yellow leg witches. Never trust a yellow leg witch.
I want that on a shirt. Never trust a yellow leg.
Dorian navigates them to a secret exit from his mother's bedroom where Rowan blasts open the fancy door without hesitation. And then I did think it was kind of funny that he's just like, oops, sorry.
He's like, my bad. Whatever.
Yeah. They shift the painting and file into the dusty hall behind the trapdoor, and thankfully the coast is clear. I also found it notable that Rowan thinks about Dorian's magic as well, and after Dorian notes the muffled screams of people outside the castle, he thinks, a gift of the king's magic, then, the enhanced hearing, raw magic that could grant him any gifts, eyes, flame, healing, heightened senses, and strength, perhaps shape-shifting if he tried. And I was like, ooh, this is definitely foreshadowing for more of what we will see from Dorian's magic in the future. But again, I definitely think it's wild to think Dorian basically encapsulates all magic with his power, and he will likely be able to do a huge variety of things with it. As I mentioned earlier, I think this connects back to the idea that Dorian's raw magic is perhaps more rooted in the general creationist power of the word, because it has such a flexible variety of capabilities. It seems like he may possess abilities and will see magic from like many of the different gods' powers that we've been introduced to so far. For example, we have the fire and light from Mala. We have healing from Silba and how he's like been able to recover himself from the venom of the wyvern and stuff. The shapeshifting from Themis. And he's also learned the truth about his father and the Valg, and that kind of connects to the Sin Eater. So I'm like, oh, what are we, what are we going to see in terms of the different ways that his magic, his magic manifests is going to align with powers that have kind of been associated with the gods and stuff too as well. And then I also wonder if by being part Valg and having his raw magic, Dorian is uniquely gifted with power that can kill the Valg, just like Aelin can with her fire.
Oh, I love all of these thoughts. I love everything you just said. Also, reading this prompted a batshit crazy thought for me. So just a buckle up, everyone. I actually put this one in invisible ink because I was very excited.
I know she hid it from me.
I
and
hid
I was
it.
like,
if you're new here, there are random things throughout the series so far that live rent-free in Lauren and I's heads. For example, Nameless is my price, or that damn owl that was with Maeve. Things that we really have no evidence to go on, but just this strong gut feeling. There's something else I haven't thought about in a while that falls into this category. And reading this thought from Rowan took me right back. Way back in Throne of Glass in chapter 52, this is after the final duel of Cain, and Selena is recovering in her room, and Dorian comes to see her. And when she's talking to him, it's described green skin and yellow fangs flash before her eyes. And Selena's aching fingers curled into a fist. Then it's never mentioned or thought about ever again. Earlier, right before the witches attack, Dorian's magic senses their arrival. And we've talked before, Lorraine mentioned it earlier in the episode, about how magic seems to know before the wielders do. What if Dorian can shapeshift? And this moment way back in TOG is foreshadowing of that. And this line right here is meant to plant the seed for his ability. And Aelin's magic was sensing this about him way back in TOG. I know, it's canon for me. Even if it's not true, it is in my mind.
No, I love this so much. And you know what? Actually, speaking of other like random weird lines, there was like that one random line where it was like Dorian's hands were fluttering like bird wings or like a hummingbird or something like that. Do you remember this?
Yeah. It's when they're having dinner. Well, it's twice, right? It's once when they're having dinner when they're children. And then there's another reference and you connected those two. I remember that.
Okay, yeah. Do you think that could tie into this as well?
Like if he's maybe he can shape into anything. I don't know. I'm charged up by this.
I don't remember when we got the green skin. Well, I don't remember if you did, but I was like, oh, it's a dragon or something.
Well, I mean, the wyvern did enter the chat shortly after that, so.
That's true. Ooh, okay, yes to shapeshifting. Dorian's gonna shapeshift. I'm on board. I like this a lot, yeah. So as they descend the stairs, Rowan also wonders what would happen to Orinth if a similar attack occurred, but since it hadn't yet, he wonders why Erewhon was waiting to do it. We kind of touched on this last episode about why Erewhon is indeed just waiting around. Some possibilities included maybe it had something to do with the witches, maybe he's waiting to get all 3 word keys, and also, as you mentioned, possibly he's waiting to see Aelin's full power. The specific thought about Orinth, however, or I guess more largely in relation to Terrasen, makes me wonder if there is some sort of specific magic or divine link tied to the area, considering we see Aelin, Adian, and Lysandra go to Brandon's temple in Ilium in chapter 12. Sometimes I kind of wonder if he's like holding off on sacking that area, either because there's something about it that's protected from him, or Mala's like, you come over here and I'm going to roast ya, or, you know, something weird like that.
Gonna roast ya.
Dorian continues grappling with leaving his people, while Rowan reminds him he has to stay alive. I thought it was notable that after Rowan asks why Dorian had asked him to spare Manon, Dorian fills him in on what she'd done. Though Rowan advises not to trust her, he says, but perhaps the gods will throw us a bone. Perhaps the Blackbeak heir will join our cause. And I was like, yes! I feel like we are getting closer and closer to this possibility, as we said earlier, especially considering Granny B's decision to have Astrid die as punishment. No way. Bye, Granny B.
Ain't no way.
We'll
see you later. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, God, I hope so. Or she's going to kill Granny B. I'll take either. Either sounds good. I also feel like we can't ignore Rowan's thought. He thinks if that coven was the most skilled of all the Iron Teeth, it could mean the difference between Orinth falling or standing against Erewhon. This absolutely feels like foreshadowing that the 13 are going to be vital to protecting Orinth at some point and or defeating Erewhon. I feel like this is just a quick thought that when you really break it down, I'm like, oh my God, yes, this is totally foreshadowing, 100%.
Yes. I agree. We get a quick flashback to both Queen of Shadows with an archway sealed off by collapsed stone, as well as a reminder of how Aelin had killed Archer Finn in Crown of Midnight when they passed an old pool of dried blood. I thought it was funny and touching that rather than be disturbed by this, it says, Rowan didn't let himself think about it, or that these fools had unwittingly given an assassin a room that connected to their queen's chambers.
All I could think was, man, if Aelin was actually evil, she could have wreaked absolute mayhem on the castle back in TOG and Con. How dumb were all of those people? Remember Kale in the beginning? He cleared her room. It was basically empty, nothing that could be used as a weapon. Meanwhile, the assassin who could kill somebody with their bare hands has a direct route right to the queen's chambers. Like, bro, terrible.
I know. Nobody thought to check all these. Well, I guess they didn't know, right? Is that what it was? Is that the stone castle was so old that people just didn't know or something
all the
like
tunnels
that?
And stuff, yeah. Still.
Yeah, that's so true. They eventually make it to an old boat, and after making one last check for the witches or other enemies, Rowan has Dorian lay in the boat covered by his cloak, and then he shifts into his hawk form, uses his magic to seal the boat in hard air, and push it out the sewer and into the Avery River. As they leave the city, Rowan looks back only once at the city that had forged and broken and sheltered his queen. And I was like, the end of an era.
You know, something about this felt really final to me. Honestly, I'm not sure we'll ever go back to Rifthold. And there's something that, in a way, is bittersweet about that, right? That city holds so much history and, I guess, good things and bad things and memories. And I don't know, there was something about that was a little bit sad to me.
Oh, you don't think it'll ever get rebuilt or like they won't come back at all?
I wondered about that. But I feel like maybe, you know, I'm just going to pretend that it's all going to work out. They'll defeat Erewhon, Dorian will be king, you know. Maybe they'll build it somewhere else. Maybe there's too much.
Oh.
You know, I don't know. I'm not sure. I could see it them never going back.
Oh, but then where would Dorian go?
Well, I mean, he has an entire continent. I mean, he can go anywhere in Otterland. He's still the king.
I guess that's true, yeah.
He's going to be in the waste with Manon.
I like that plan better, I think.
Me too.
So
yeah.
We also get some more insight from Rowan about his feelings for Aelin when he thinks these past weeks of travel had been torture. The need to claim her, taste her, driving him out of his wits. But Daro's comments about him being a prince in name only made him question whether it'd be a good thing they had not taken that final step. And I was like, no, get rid of that thought immediately. I don't want to hear it. However, I guess, realistically, Rowan is cut off from any of his money in Doranel, and all he had to offer his queen is, quote, the strength of his sword and the depth of his magic and the loyalty of his heart.
I refuse to even entertain any of these thoughts. Rowan needs to stay in his lane and fly his ass straight back to Aelin, and I don't want to hear any more of this nonsense. Ain't gonna happen. Ain't no way. Ain't no how. I just don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Aedion will fall on his sword and marry someone on behalf of Aelin before he makes her do it.
Oh.
I know, that's sad too.
Yeah, I was like, I want Aedion to be able to choose too.
I know.
So we'll see. At this point in time, if marriage is what it takes to get allies and an army for Terrason's cause, then Rowan knew she would do it. Consider marriage to a foreign prince or lord, even if this thing between them, even if he knew it was not mere lust or even just love. Again, I don't think that's gonna happen, but it does make it clear that they do need to find some allies real fast here. They are in desperate need of those.
I agree. I can't explain it, but although this is a valid concern and potential problem, to me it just feels like a plot device to build tension that makes us worry about Aelin and Rowan being together. Honestly, I get upset and then I just remember that SJM wrote this, and if there's one thing that she loves, it's fated mates. So they're going to be fine. Or maybe I'm in total denial. I don't know.
No, we're not in denial. No way. But more importantly, all of these concerns and his feelings that this thing between them, the force of it could devour the world. And if they pick them, it might very well cause the end of it. So obviously still on mate theory.
Yep. Retweet.
The mate theory train. That's like full send.
They're practically screaming it at us now. So, like, okay.
But I also wondered if there is something divine or prophetic about their love. This seems to imply that Aelin and Rowan may be faced with some choice to choose their love over the world, and choosing that love may come at the cost of some sort of predestined path for Aelin or alter the fate of the world. And that makes me want to cry.
Yep. I read it a little bit differently. I think in the context of his line of thinking, he means if they choose each other, it prevents Aelin from marrying for an army and resources, which could mean Erewhon's victory. And that's what he means by causing the end of the world, is eliminating the potential for an alliance. So I don't think them being together does any actual harm other than it prevents Aelin from marrying for political alliance. So that's how I took it.
Oh, okay. But you don't foresee any kind of situation where they might be used against each other? Like, I'm thinking about some kind of battle thing where, like, they'll be knowing that they have a love with each other. They'll try to go save the other one at the expense of other people, or, like, they'll have to choose. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes. I could definitely see us being set up for that. But here's the thing. At her core, Aelin will put her people and her kingdom above anyone and everything, including herself. I mean, she is super sacrificial, right? And Rowan will put Aelin and her wants above everything else. And even though it would literally kill Rowan, I think Rowan, at the end of the day, would always do what he knows Aelin would want. And if that means saving her or saving Terrasen, I think it would destroy Rowan, but I think Rowan would save Terrasen. I really do.
Oh, wow.
If it came to that. Wow, now I'm sad. Just made myself sad.
I should not have said anything.
Wow.
All right, everybody.
What an uplifting episode for all to enjoy. Thanks, Lorraine. Who let you in here?
I already had a key. As they continue traveling, the tone only gets more ominous when Rowan thinks this was war. These lands would endure far worse in the coming days and months. His queen, no matter how he tried to shield her, would endure far worse. And yeah, that really makes me feel like something bad is going to happen to Aelin, and I don't like that at all. All right, that ends depressing chapter 8. Moving on to chapter 9. We check back in with Elide, who's continued her trek for another 3 days since we last checked in with her, and she'd felt someone tracking her. In an effort to try and confuse whoever was tracking her, aka Lorcan, Elide had also managed to confuse herself, and without a clear view of the stars, she couldn't find the Lord of the North, her beacon home. Someone get homegirl a map. She needs one.
No map, and I can't read. But even if you gave her a map, she wouldn't be able to read it. She can't read.
What? Yeah, but she knows directions. Like, she can...
But she wouldn't be able to read the names of the countries.
Yeah, but she knows Terrasen is north, right?
I don't know. Poor Elide.
I know.
I love her so much. I thought it was really interesting when Elide thinks she'd offer the dark god her soul for a few hours of peace and safety. Which is interesting because there have been several references to Lorcan's power and how it was, quote-unquote, gifted by Hellas himself. Hellas is the dark god, and what a coincidence that Lorcan is associated with him, and he actually does end up offering her peace and safety. And so I thought that was like a nice little turn of phrase.
Yeah.
I don't know, roundabout way of a connection.
Some symbolism. Yes, I like that.
Symbolism. That's right. We're talking a lot about symbols in this episode.
We love the symbols.
We love them.
On this day, Elide stops to refill her water, hoping for a break, when she hears howls in the forest. But these were not the howls of wolves. Elide thinks there had been nights in Morath when she'd been yanked from sleep because of howls like that. Howls she'd believed were imagined when they didn't sound again. No one ever mentioned them. This is definitely some quick foreshadowing for what this creature actually is, but we know Erewhon has been creating all sorts of very scary creatures in the Farian Gap and Morath and everything, and this seems to be yet another one of them. But then to scare her even more, none other than Lorcan sneaks up on her by the stream and says, "Unless you want to be lunch girl, I suggest you come with me." Unfortunately, they are both prey at this time. From here, we change to Lorcan's POV, who is well aware they could die. But he couldn't help but notice Elide's human cinnamon and elderberry scent. But there was also still the, quote, other smell, that tinge of darkness fluttering about her like a hummingbird's Wait, I think it's more likely at this point he smells or senses the word key. Last week, I'd kind of wondered if this was also possibly hinting at Elid's lineage as an Iron Teeth witch, but I guess with this description, it seems more likely that it's just the word key that he's sensing.
I agree, especially because he makes a comparison to the quote-unquote key he's carrying, which we know is really just a fog ring, but either way, they're both fog objects, which would have a similar scent.
Lorcan was pretty sure Elid hadn't summoned the creatures, which we learn are called Ilkin, but there was little time to waste because they were being herded by two different packs of them. Elid decides they needed to head east, just as the high-pitched screeching, like a bat, cries out. Elid and Lorcan start sprinting that way, and he briefly debates leaving her behind, but he ultimately thinks there's no point in having tracked her for so long if she died now. He also briefly contemplates using his quote-unquote word key, but then he thinks if he used the key, then he'd deserve the damnation it'd call upon him. I liked getting this detail because I actually do believe Lorcan. I don't think he would use the keys for his own use, but it's good to know that he understands how consequential doing so would be for anyone to use them, including himself.
That's a really good point. I guess I never really thought that he wanted to use them for himself, so I wasn't worried about it. But you're right that this thought really confirms his intentions are at least not to retrieve them for personal gain, if not very altruistic in nature.
I also did just kind of think it was funny because even if he wanted to in this moment, it wouldn't have worked because it's fake,
Can you imagine him trying to whip it out and then be like, oh, fuck. Oh my God, he would be so mad.
Yeah. Anyways, Lorcan uses his power to cast out a, quote, invisible barrier wafting black tendrils of wind. Elid notes this, and she's clearly very surprised, but it holds for just a second against 4 creatures that slam into it. Unfortunately, it doesn't last much longer than that, and somehow these creatures, quote, crack the wall, and Lorcan thinks impossible. No one could get through those shields, not even Rowan, Redding, Whitethorn. I think this is the first hint that indicates that the Ilkin are, I guess, possibly more experiments created with Wordstone or blended with the Valg because they possess power that is stronger than Lorcan's power. Perhaps this is one of the things created from breeding the witches with the Valg?
I thought about that, but to our knowledge, all of those creatures were destroyed when Kaltane immolated herself. So then I was like, maybe not, but still a vault creature created by Erewhon, but not specifically the one from the Yellow Leg Switches.
That's a good point.
But you never know. Possible.
Apparently, he just has all kinds of creatures.
Dude.
Which does not make me feel great because who knows what else he has.
Yep.
It's clear that this is an entirely new creature or something very ancient and long forgotten because Lorcan thinks it had been a long, long while since he had a new enemy to study to break. And Lorcan is like 500 years old, so for him to have never encountered one definitely makes it seem more likely that this is an entirely new thing that has been created.
Or even if he hadn't encountered it personally, he probably would have at least heard of its existence. So the fact that he hasn't encountered anything like it indicates that it's either extremely ancient, like so ancient and long forgotten, or it's brand new.
At this point, Lorcan tells Elid to keep going while he stops to face the Ilkin. And I liked getting some more descriptions of Lorcan's power. He summons a, quote, chill wind edged in black mist, and then we learn that it was not wind like Whitethorn's, and not light and flame like Whitethorn's bitch queen, not even raw magic like the new king of Otterlin. No, Lorcan's magic was that of will, of death, and thought and destruction. There was no name for it, not even his queen had known what it was, where it had come from. A gift from the dark god from Hellas. Maeve had mused, a dark gift for her dark warrior, and left it at that. This was interesting to me because it signals that Lorcan's magic is unrecognized by even someone like Maeve, who is incredibly old. It also seems like Lorcan was blessed with magic from the god Hellas himself, similar to the way that Aelin was blessed and gifted with Mala's magic.
I agree. I really want to know who Lorcan's parents are. We know his mother was a human and his father was Fae, but I'm dying to know who he inherited his power from. I want to know so bad. I don't know if it'll ever be revealed, but the fact that even Maeve is like, I don't know. Just makes me just
True.
like, what if Hellas himself is his father? That's where my brain keeps going.
Oh, his father, like, not just gifted him the magic, but, like,
Yeah.
is bred with a human and was like,
Yeah.
"Alright."
Yeah.
Ooh.
I
That'd be
know,
really
right?
cool.
I mean, well, I had Elena with Brandon,
True, that's true,
so
yeah. Ooh, I like that.
me
Yes,
too.
I like this a lot. Lorcan initially feels confident he can defeat the creatures until he sees them, and it said, Lorcan had no words for what he saw. It's not funny, but his tune did change very quickly when he saw gigantic clawed hands, and it's described they were smiling beneath their smashed in bat-like noses to reveal double rows of needle-like teeth.
I'm surprised his bowels didn't turn to water, as SJM often likes to do.
The Oaken stand up, reaching a foot taller than Lorcan even, and when they speak to Lorcan, he thinks there were very, very few beasts who could speak in the tongues of mortal and fae. Most had developed it through magic, ill-gained, or blessed. I think this continues to feed into the idea that they were created with the word stone or like bred with the Valg somehow because they seem to know multiple languages innately. I also thought it was notable that the Ilken have poisoned claw tips on their fingers, which is similar to how the wyvern also have poison tipped claws and barbs on their tails.
That's a good connection. It seems like all the Vol creatures we've encountered possess some kind of terrible poison, whether it be in tails,
Yeah.
claws, fangs. It seems like that's part of the makeover package in Morath.
You get poison and
That's
you
right.
get poison. At this point, I was actually not feeling very great for Lorcan. The odds of 4 Ilkin against 1 Fae really don't seem great. But I do commend Lorcan's determination to make sure they didn't get a hold of the word key or Athral's ring, because that would be disastrous for Erewhon to possess both of them. Lorcan suddenly throws an axe at one of them, followed by 2 knives at the next 2, but the 4th one claws through his shield of magic, melting it under its touch. And I was like, the fuck?
So was Lorcan. Lorcan was also like, the fuck?
And even more King Prawn was the fact that only the beheaded Ilkin remained dead. The other ones revived themselves. But I think that is at least consistent with every Valg infected or like created creature we've seen so far.
At first, I was nervous, and then he did all of his weapons throwing, and I was like, phew, okay, we're going to be totally fine. And then he comes back with, they're reviving, and I was like, absolutely not. Nope. Cue the screeching violins, okay? I was like,
Yeah.
actually screaming. I did not feel good.
Lorcan finally asks what they are, and this is when we learn that they are called the Ilkin, who have been sent to retrieve their quarry for his dark majesty. Lorcan feigns double agent and asks why they want a lead, to which they respond, she is important to our king. Retrieve her, and he will fill you with power far greater than feeble shields. At this point, I was starting to wonder if maybe Erewhon does know a lead has the key. I kind of don't feel like he would care about a lead unless he thought she had it, right? And then as like a separate thought, I also think that the fact that Ilkin have tracked her here may indicate that they can feel or sense the word key's magic as well.
That's a really good question. I'm undecided at this point. It's also possible he wants her because he thinks she can replace Caltaine and he can put a key inside of her. Or maybe he just wants to ask her what happened to Caltaine. I guess my question is, how would he know she's alive and that she has it? That would be some really big assumption building. And if he knew that, wouldn't he assume Manon is implicated in the 13? Because there's no way that a lead fought her way out of there, right? So that's kind of my hang up on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, so I was also wondering maybe a lead is important to him, and there is more that Erewhon knows about a lead's lineage and power. And then we know that they were about to do something to her at the end of Queen of Shadows. So I guess, yeah, perhaps they were still wanting to do whatever they were going to do. And then my last thought from this little section, I like that even though Lorcan doesn't really know a lead, he decides to help keep her alive and prays they couldn't scent his bluff as he bought her more time. In response to the Ilkin, Lorcan thinks was that the price for the humans they'd once been. Magic that was somehow immune to what flowed naturally in this world, or had the choice been taken from them, as surely as their souls had been stolen too. I thought that line was interesting because the Ilkin have certain attributes that seem distinctly human. For example, their general, figure is described as having like limbs and they stand up like people. And then a lead in the next chapter mentions how their eyes seem really human. I was wondering if this continues to feed into the idea that they weren't necessarily created from scratch or summoned from another world like the Ritterak was, but instead they were specifically bred and created using beings that already exist in this world. For example, using the witches again, the humans, and the Valg or the Wordstone, or I don't know, any other combination of Valg, Wordstone, some other creature, or like some other being. They kind of also reminded me of that creature Aelin and Dorian found back in the catacombs under the library in Crown of Midnight. I don't think that they're the same thing, but something about them both being human-like in a way just kind of triggered that memory.
Oh, you're totally right. The descriptions are very similar, especially the really sharp and deadly claws. Because remember, there's all those descriptions in Calm how it'd been like trying to claw its way out. And there's all these deep gouges and like actual stone. Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Lorcan feels an invisible touch that he'd trusted his entire life that warns him to run rather than fight, and the chapter ends just as a scream from the forest interrupts them. And I definitely feel like that invisible touch Lorcan feels is probably guidance from Hellas, similar to how Aneth guides a lead. And that ends chapter 9. Moving on to chapter 10. So it's pretty safe to say I never want to meet an Ilkin in real life, but that was not a lead's luck today.
The only characters from this book I want to meet are Adian, Rowan, Dorian, and Lorcan, and that's it. Just kidding. I would also like to be friends with Aelin Ashriver Galvanius. As a matter of fact, I want to be her best friend. So definitely do not want to be Ilkin. I know.
But no, Lysandra.
Lead. Oh my God, you're so right. Yeah, but definitely don't want to meet Ilkin. I'm good on that. Count me out on that one.
That's a no for me, dog. That's for sure.
In all seriousness, as an overarching thought for this chapter, I knew a lead was going to be okay. It's way too early in the book for her to die, and she's way too important. She's literally carrying a word key. What I didn't expect is how she got out of the situation. To be honest, I really thought Lorcan was going to come crashing in and save her at the last second, and I was delighted that a lead rescued herself with quite literally nothing but her wits. A lead is quickly becoming one of my favorite characters. I love an underdog. Okay, I love it. I know we've talked about this a little bit, but like one minute she's like, I have no map. And the next she's like, don't speak to me. You know, and I'm like, oh my God, I just love her.
You don't want to know what they put in me.
I know. You're like terrified of her. And I'm like, girl. I mean, you think about her description. She's like this tiny, petite waif of a thing. And yet she's so formidable in her own way. And I like that a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Very observant, very good at just kind of blending in and figuring things out. So Elite describes the creature as standing and speaking like a man, and its eyes utterly soulless, yet the shape of them, they were human too. I gotta hand it to Elite because rather than succumb to fear, she channels her inner Blackbeak and thinks WWMBD, and that stands for What Would Manon Blackbeak Do? I love the quote, there were other weapons than those made of iron and steel, because it's one of those like very simple but very powerful lines. And I think it also perfectly sums up a lead the more we learn about her.
Oh my God, Lorraine, before I even read your note, I was literally trying to mentally figure out the letters for What Would Manon Blackbeak Do. I was going to type the same thing, literally. I want a bracelet. I want one of those from our bands, you know, WWMBD. Although,
we love it.
That may not be good because honestly, I feel like most of the time Manon Blackbeak would rip their throats out. So maybe like in real life, it doesn't quite translate the same.
Just grab him by the throat.
What did they do at the end of Finish Shadows? She pulled his spine out of his back.
Yeah, she just like punched through like into it, just like pulled it out. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah, maybe not what would Manon Blackbeak do, you know? What would a lead lock-in pretending to be Manon Blackbeak do? That's probably our baseline.
But that's a little too long, so
yeah.
What would Manon Blackbeak do? I thought it was interesting that as part of her scheme, Lead grabs the word key, willing that otherworldly presence to fill the clearing, the world, as she pretends to be on the search for the girl as well. Notably, Lead notes the creature seemed to scent that strange off scent surrounding the rock, and this is definitely interesting because that power causes the Ilkin to hesitate. Whether it's out of recognition or from some kind of hierarchy or deference to a greater power, not sure, but in either case, good for a lead. I also thought it was interesting that the Ilkin reacts with fear when a lead says, "Tell your brethren that if you interfere again, I will personally oversee what delights you experience upon Morath's tables." Because that kind of feeds into my earlier wondering of whether or not maybe they were human or part human at some point. But I don't know.
Yeah, this phrasing made me think that the Ilkin were once men that had somehow been experimented on and altered to become the Ilkin, and that's why it shows fear and why it has human eyes. But, I mean, I could really see it going either way. Who knows?
True, true. Elite does a pretty convincing job of playing a Blackbeak, except for her one mistake of telling the Ilkin she'd injured her ankle. Fortunately, she sticks to her guns and says, "Do not make me reveal what His Dark Majesty put inside of me on that table." Then, as if in response, the stone in her hand throbbed, and she could have sworn darkness flickered. Back in Heir of Fire, when Aelin realizes that the Amulet of Orinth actually contained a word key hidden by Brandon, we learn that the word keys are inherently neutral, and it said the word keys weren't inherently bad or good. What they were depended on how their bearers used them. Around the necks of the kings and queens of Terrasen, one of them had been unknowingly used for good and had protected its bearers for millennia. It had protected her. That night she fell into the river, for it had been the word mark she'd seen glowing in the frozen depths. I wonder if the word key was helping a lead in this moment for her, in this moment for her courage, sort of like how the Eye of Elena helped Chaol. Regardless, I think it's interesting that it reacted to a lead, and of course, I wonder what that means about a lead.
Oh, that's a really good comparison. I think the way it's described in the moment, how it almost seems to pulse in her hand when she says that, indicates that somehow in some small way, it was doing whatever it could to protect her, similar to how probably it would have for Orlan when he wore it in the Amulet of Orinth.
At this point, the Ilkin believes the lead and leaves her. #thanks, Aneth. A lead then continues on another half mile before she stops and vomits. So this is kind of random, but I've been watching The Office recently, and I just watched the Christmas episode in season 3 where they take a staff cruise trip and Michael drinks too much and then he like throws up, but he passes it off as because of his medication and he calls it vomicillin. I know it's not the same thing, but I'm just thinking of
just where your brain went.
Yeah, vomiting and vomicillin, so.
Oh my God, I love The Office. Is this your first time watching it?
All the way through from the very beginning, yeah. I've always seen sporadic episodes and watched different ones here and there, but I haven't fully sat down and watched it start to finish.
Oh, it's so good. You'll like it. I didn't watch it.
It's so funny.
It is. I didn't watch it fully or really at all until I was pregnant with my first child. So back in 2018, 2019. I was not watching it when it aired, but it's great.
Right.
It's super good.
Oh my gosh. Jim and Pam, I love them.
Oh my God. They're like Aelin and Rowan.
I know. Anyways, to get back on track, Elide is also confronted by Lorcan again, who had indeed survived his Ilkin encounter and was currently covered in black blood. Delicious. He demands to know why she smells like one of them and why they chase her, to which Elide decides to actually be truthful in this case. She tells him she'd spent the last several months living in Morath and that they were hunting her because she'd escaped. And her current plan was to head north. Then, to make sure she wasn't lying, Lorcan slices Elide's arm. I get it, but also I was like, no, Lorcan, don't do that to Elide. However, I did find the transition from that to him then telling her his actual name and then it says go hauling her over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes before running off into the forest. It's just kind of funny. He's like, I don't trust you to, okay, come with me. Off we go, Also in that moment, Elide realizes that Lorcan is in fact Demi-Fae, and a very large one at that.
Honestly, it was hilarious. The whole sequence at the end was really just funny to picture. Just this giant behemoth of a man scooping Elide up, throwing over his shoulder, and just takes off running into the forest. Yep. It's kind of ridiculous when you think about it.
So from there, we switch to Lorcan's POV again, and they finally come to a stop after running for miles. Don't count me in for cardio.
Don't put me down for cardio.
Yeah. He reflects on how he'd managed to get past the Ilkin by using his magic to get past their, quote, natural-born immunity to kill two before taking off to find a lead. I found this interesting because it almost seems like the Ilkin were bred to be resistant to the magic of the Fae, or somehow they are just not as easily affected by Lorcan's magic like other beings tend to be.
I do wonder if this information is foreshadowing that at some point there will be another Ilkin attack and Lorcan will be able to share the information with Rowan and Aelin.
So it's clear Lorcan is definitely even more interested in a lead now, especially knowing she was smart enough to get the Ilkin to leave her alone. Eventually, he asks her name and a lead tells him Marion. And I was like, oh, rest in peace, Lady Marion. And then it's revealed that they are actually in the middle of Otterlin, a day's hike away from the Avery River. So I guess at this point, Alid is now about halfway to Terrason's border, which is good to know. But crossing the river is going to be a challenge, it seems like, because they talk about how it's claimed ships before and it's this huge rushing river. And I was like, oh,
He said, interesting. Well, first and foremost, seeing her use her mother's name brought back up Lady Marion's sacrifice all over again. And I was not okay. As you guys know, that was the first and only time I publicly cried on this podcast. And guess what? I'm never going to do it again. Okay, that's totally a lie. I definitely will. But it was devastating, but also kind of nice. I don't know. It made me feel all the feelings. Also, I feel like the information about the Avery River is going to be important. It's good world building that I never really realized that it was that big of a river. If it's legit big enough to take down ships, it must be monstrous. So I feel like I need to add that to my mental map of the continent and how everything works, because I think that's going to be important.
So Lorcan and Alid begin to converse about personal details for a bit. Lorcan reveals that he's actually from Wendelin, while Alid clarifies that she'd escaped from Morath. And I was like, oh, I felt really bad for her when she reveals that her ankle was injured and everything. And then she says, allies in Morath are usually whole. Their dark magic could surely cure a cripple, and they surely would have no use for one. But in the end, I'm very glad that she got out of there.
This did make me wonder if dark magic can actually heal Alid's ankle. Then what if perhaps light magic or whatever good magic can heal? We'll see what happens with Chaol and Tower of Dawn. But I feel like if they can heal Chaol, who literally his spinal cord is fractured, severed, I don't know, broken, then maybe they can heal the lead too. Maybe that'll be part of our character's journey. I'm not sure.
That's a good point. I mean, I would imagine so, right?
That's what I would think too.
I hope they do, though. That would be nice for her. I want it to get fixed so that she doesn't have to be in pain or anything anymore.
I know.
I did, however, find it touching that Lorcan gives her a tin of salve for her ankle in exchange for info about Morath. And it looks like Lorcan's hardened heart is softening just a little smidge for Alid. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Alid, aka Marion, tells Lorcan about the witches, the experiments, and the growing army in Morath, but she lies about knowing how the castle exploded, which also served as her escape opportunity. She also goes on to say that she's heading to Terrason to find Slain Sardathian to fulfill a debt to a friend, rest in peace, Lady Caltaine, and then find her queen, Aelin Galathinius. Lorcan asks why she would want to help Aelin, and I loved Alid's response. She says, because I am from Terrason and believed my queen dead, and now she's alive and fighting, so I will fight with her, so that no other girls will be taken from their homes and brought to Morath and forgotten. And of course, Lorcan also strategically does not tell Alid that Selena and Aelin are one and the same.
Oh, I just wanted to screw with this part. I was like, damn it, Lorcan, just tell her. But it's okay because I do feel like he eventually will. I get why he's kind of like, girl, I don't know you. So he's not going to, give over all the info. But I wanted him to tell her so bad.
Do you think Alid would be pissed at him if she knows that
she's going to be so mad at him. Absolutely. She's be like, you fucking asshole. You couldn't just tell me that. Yeah, absolutely. I'm ready for Alid to give Lorcan the business because it's going to happen. Because nobody gives Lorcan the business and I want to see it.
Yes, I agree. It's going to
And then I want them to kiss.
When Alid asks why Lorcan wants to get to Morath, he informs her he was sent by his mistress to stop the threat it poses, though he doesn't go into further detail. I really love this secret tension. Lorcan still has no idea that Alid has what he wants, and then Alid has no idea he knows who she is looking for. So
it's hot.
I just
super
hot.
Love
it. Yes,
no,
yeah.
I'm just kidding. I thought it was kind of funny when Alid says, "You're one man, male." And he responds, "I have my skills, just as you have yours." And he just stares at her point blank. And I was like, what kind of skills you got, Lorcan?
Please, show us.
Continue
Show,
on.
don't tell. Yeah.
Show, don't tell.
Okay, anyways.
That was the perfect response. That was literally perfection. Sarah J. Maas should have wrote that instead.
Before continuing on, they make a plan to hide out among seasonal merchants or carnivals in order to cross the Acanthus River. And once they cross far enough, they'll head their separate ways, Alid going north and Lorcan going south. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Mm-hmm. We'll see if they end up separating.
Just sure won't.
Things sure will not. Things are getting a smidge more flirtatious, unintentionally, when Alid makes Lorcan promise to protect her if they're going to travel together, and he does. Lorcan says, "I promise I will not abandon you." This is pretty big news since, as Lorcan reiterates, promises and his word were really the only thing that Lorcan actually values. And I love this. And I'm very excited to see how their relationship continues to develop moving forward in this book.
Oh my God, I want them to kiss so bad. I don't know why I'm so desperate for love in this book. I'm hungry for it. And you know what? As I'm saying it, actually, that's a lie. I do know why. It's because every damn buddy is letting it burn slow. Dorian and Manon, Aelin and Rowan, aiding Lysandra. And someone has got to give in, okay? I waited 6 fucking books and I'm ready. I'm ready for something.
Little bit.
Boo. The last action we got was Chaol and Aelin. Exactly.
In a broom closet.
In the broom closet. I was going to say that. The broom closet. I don't even really count Saoirse and Dorian. Well, they never sealed the deal, But
true.
It never really hit the same way. And so
it didn't feel right.
It didn't feel right. Mm-mm.
You knew it wasn't like
forever
kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Satisfied with his promise, Alid agrees to give him information as well, and then they continue on with their next move for when they get to the river. And that ends chapter 10. Moving on to chapter 11. All right, guys, buckle up, because honestly, Granny B is going straight to hell, and this chapter is bad news bears.
Wow. This is a really terrible place to stop chapter-wise. I cannot wait to read and see how the hell they're going to get out of this, because if they kill Astrid, I will DNF. The Book Done Fantasy podcast will cease to exist. I'll be done. I will stop reading forever. I will not allow this.
We're going to riot. So Manon lands back in Morath and considers how royally fucked she is for being either directly or indirectly responsible for the deaths of 5 Yellowlegs witches. She's done her best to cover things up. For example, she and Abraxos roared their victory and command from atop the castle. Plus, she hadn't told even her 13 what had really happened with Dorian and the Yellowlegs witches. It's noted that Sorrel and Astrid stare closely at her once they'd found her moments after the events with Dorian. And I think they definitely know Manon is lying. In fact, I'm sure all of the 13 probably do. But I think that makes their loyalty to her even clearer. They don't disagree or question Manon, not necessarily out of obedience, but because they would have agreed with what she'd done. And I think ultimately they trust her instincts.
Oh yeah, if Iskra consented on her, then absolutely the 13 can. Plus, they know Manon so well. Even that conversation Astrid and Manon are having when she's walking into the council chamber, she's like, "You have to believe it. Lie your ass off." So they know she's lying. They may not know precisely what went down, but it definitely Astrid knows. Because Astrid flew her ass all the way to Rifthold to save the damn king. Well, it was a prince at the time, but homegirl knows. Okay?
Yep.
For sure.
As Manon walks through the halls of Morath, she continues to remember what had happened. And this time, she's thinking about what Iskra had said to her. We know Iskra has never liked Manon, but now she has 2 more reasons to hate her. One, because Iskra believes Rifthold was hers to take, and Manon was only supposed to oversee. And 2, because she smelled the scent of her Yellow Legs witches on Manon and knew that she'd killed at least one of them. On top of that, Manon lies to Iskra about killing the Yellow Legs because they attacked her first, and this is a story that she continues to maintain as well. You obviously knew that something bad was going to happen in this chapter when Manon remembers Iskra's words before leaving Rifthold, and those words were, "You are a liar, witch killer." Iskra is overall just a little tattletale bitch, and you knew she was running straight to the High Witches to tell on Manon. Manon was also keenly aware this meeting was likely going to end badly, so she tells Astrid and Sorrel to take the 13 and leave if things go poorly or if she ends up dead.
I know we've said this so many times before, but I love how loyal the 13 are to each other. I think it's very telling that Manon doesn't even seem concerned for her own life. Her only concern is making sure the 13 get out and that they're safe. I mean, she's literally like, listen to me at all costs. You understand? Don't worry about me. Just go. And I'm like, no. But they're going to be okay because Sarah J. Maas will not make me DNF this early in the series, okay? I've invested too much. We've read like 2,500 pages, so.
Hundreds of hours dedicated to this book series. Astrid warns her to deny until her very last breath, and this is exactly what Manon does as she enters the meeting where all the matrons and their heirs were already assembled. Manon takes note of Petra's presence, who she hadn't seen since War Games when she saved Petra's life and Keeley had died, but more notable is the caution and, quote, warning that shone in her deep blue eyes. This is some quick foreshadowing for Petra's siding with Manon and her fulfilling of a life debt, but it also continues to foreshadow that this meeting is really not going to end well. Petra nods to her slightly, and it says, more than a mere acknowledgement of an heir to an heir.
There's been this subtle undercurrent of alliance between these two since Heir of Fire, even before Manon saved her during War Games. Remember, there's that scene when she brings Manon meat for Abraxos, and before Iskra pushed Manon into the Wyvern Pit, Manon and Iskra are having this conversation where it really seems like Petra wants to be an ally with Manon. And I think I talk about this later, but I can't help but think, given that Petra's a blue blood and we know they're more spiritual and in tune with the three-faced goddess, that Petra has this sense about Manon and her destiny. And that's why she's, I don't think she's allying herself to like get ahead or anything like that. But there's just undercurrent of camaraderie between
knowing
them.
Knowing that it's right.
Yes, exactly. And I just can't shake that feeling.
We get a brief recap of how the Blue Blood Witches were more spiritual and, fanatically worshipped the three-faced goddess, in addition to a clear change in Petra's demeanor since her wyvern died. There's a quote that says, "Witches did not mourn because witches did not love enough to allow it to break them, even if Astrid, now taking up her place by the Blackbeak matron second, had proved otherwise." I found this notable because I think it adds to the larger story that all of the Iron-Teeth witches were taught to be vicious, heartless, and cruel. Astrid and Petra are examples that the witches are capable of love naturally, but the shifts we've seen in Manon also represent that they can learn to love and change.
I know I mentioned this earlier in the episode, but I still think back to what the Kraken Witch said in Heir of Fire. They have made you into monsters, made Manon, and we feel sorry for you. I think it's honestly one of my favorite scenes in the whole series. It's so good. And I hear it in my head all the time in all of Manon's scenes.
I need to go re-listen to Heir of Fire. Such an emotional book.
I kind of want to.
I loved it.
Yeah. Especially knowing what we know now. Now I'm like, God. Yes.
I also wonder if this in itself is going to be the biggest divider of the Iron-Teeth witches. As soon as more witches start to display love for one another, it will have some sort of domino effect and crack the foundation that the Iron-Teeth have traditionally used to maintain their hierarchies.
Ooh, I bet it will be. I guarantee Manon will have this big epiphany that loving and caring for the 13 is not what makes her weak, but it's what makes her strong. Yes. She's primed for that trope, and I'm fucking ready. That's right. Love conquers all, baby.
Through love, all is possible.
If you know, you know.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jinx.
So Granny B stands up to start the meeting, and Manon thinks her dark hair plaited over the crown of her head, like the crown her grandmother sought for them, for her and Manon, high queens of the wastes. She'd once promised Manon, even if it meant selling out every witch in this room. First of all, I think this speaks volumes about Granny B. She is selfish and power hungry and willing to betray all the witches in order to get to the power that she wants. We've seen this played out in how she, was so willing to agree to Erewhon's experiments and just her general eagerness to side with a freaking Val King. Second, I think this definitely foreshadows that we will see a High Queen that unites all the witches together in the future. And I previously wondered about the symbolism of Manon getting that crowned helmet for her armor in the last set of chapters, but I think this detail adds to this idea that part of Manon's path is to steer a new order among the witches, similar to what we've seen from Aelin in Dorian's past so far. She's going to become the High Queen of the Wastes, I think.
Ooh, she had to fight Ansel for it.
Oh, that's true. Who would win, I wonder?
Oh, obviously Manon. Yeah, oh, come on. Don't get me wrong. Ansel's great, but I'm hoping Aelin will somehow get involved and step in and save Ansel from Manon ripping out her spine.
The meeting starts with Granny B stating, 3 stand gathered, 3 matrons to honor the 3 faces of our mother. And then Manon thinks, maiden mother crone, it was why the Yellowlegs matron was always ancient, why the Blackbeak was always a wish in her prime, and why Cressida, as the blue blood matron, still looked young and fresh. We got an introduction to this idea that the 3 faces of the 3-faced goddess were represented by the maiden, the mother, and the crone back in Heir of Fire. I find it interesting that each of the covens represent one of these 3 faces, considering we know the covens are highly competitive with each other rather than unified. And I would imagine that these 3 archetypes are supposed to probably work in harmony together, but there is currently a lot of division and tension between all the witches thanks to the hierarchy that the Iron Teeth have set up and designed into how they treat each other and how they operate.
That's a really good point. It seems like based on the description, the sides of the 3-faced goddess are one and the same and that they should work together. But it seems like they've all been trying to undercut each other for God knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. Maybe Manon will be the uniting element for all of those 3 parts of the 3-faced goddess.
To add to my speculation about Manon becoming a High Queen one day, perhaps breaking the cycle of division and cruelty with the Iron Teeth witches will help symbolically unify all 3 faces of the goddess as well. Like the restoration of harmony and unity, aka learning to love, will contribute to a restructuring of how the Iron Teeth witches operate, and Manon will be the one to do it. To continue with the direct events, I found it really impactful that Cressida declares the crone's sickle hangs above us, let it be the mother's blade of justice. I think by stating that it's the crone's sickle, this clearly indicates this was brought on by the Yellowlegs to exact retribution against Manon. They say it's a trial to determine judgment, but really, they already had their minds made up about what they wanted.
I agree.
The trial begins to decide the guilt and what, payment would be required of Manon for the Yellowleg Sentinel, whose death also represents a crime against Iskra as part of Iskra's direct coven, as well as the other 4 Yellowlegs that were killed. The most interesting twist, although not really surprising, is that Petra steps in to ask why Manon saved her during the war games, and then she actually sides with Manon. Petra says, she risked her life and the life of her mount to spare me from death. I do not comprehend why Manon Blackbeak would save me only to later turn on her Yellowleg sisters. You crowned her wingleader for her obedience, discipline, and brutality. Do not let the anger of Iskra Yellowleg sully the qualities you saw in her then, and which still shine forth today. Do not lose your wingleader over a misunderstanding. Manon chalks all of this up to a life debt owed on Petra's part, but I think there's more to this. Petra was surprised Manon remembered Keely's name, and I think Petra definitely has that humanity that Manon is starting to discover in herself as well, even if Petra could never admit that out loud to any of the other witches.
I know I touched on this earlier. I think Petra knows Manon is special. She might know the full reason why, or she might not. But either way, I think she knows that she's more than just the heir to the Blackbeaks. And as I kind of touched on earlier, that makes sense because the Blue Bloods are more spiritual and they have a greater connection to the divine. And I think this is all just further evidence to support that Petra may not know something, but she senses something about Manon and her importance.
All right, guys. So prepare yourselves for some very strong anger against Granny B, because there is truly nothing to describe the rage that I feel for her right now. So rather than punish Manon with blows, as was the usual, or even, consider the fact that Manon is her heir and you'd expect her to try and help her granddaughter out, instead, Granny B knew exactly what punishment would hurt Manon most for getting caught. And it says, with triumph lighting her eyes, Granny states, "Your second, Astrid Blackbeak, shall pay the blood debt between our clans. She dies at sunrise tomorrow." No! Truly, what an evil, conniving weasel Valg. Granny B is no witch. She is a straight up Valg. Because honestly, she was just dying to get rid of Astrid this whole time, and this was extremely calculated on her part. Granny B has obviously taken note of Astrid's humanity and Manon's growing humanity. I think she thinks the best way to get Manon back under her control is to target something Manon highly values, and that, of course, is Astrid. And I hate Granny B for that.
Just add it to the list. As I said on the last episode, the one thing you need to know about me with this podcast is I hate Granny B more than life itself. I hate her more than Erewhon. I hate her more than King of Otterland. I hate her more than Maeve. I hate her. And if she touches one precious hair on Astrid's head, I will DNF this book so fast. I'm dead fucking serious. It's just so enraging because, like you said, you just know Granny B has been waiting for years to find an opportunity to get rid of Astrid. And honestly, I'm worried because I don't know how they're going to get out of this, short of just like packing up the wyverns and hitting the road. I really don't know how they're going to maneuver out of this, honestly.
Of course, she I don't know.
Kills all the matrons.
Slays more witches and escapes out of there. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
A terrible place to stop in the witch's story, but that's how the chapters fell this week. Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, guys.
All right, so that ends chapter 11, and now we just have our final chapter left to go, chapter 12. So I was very, very excited about the information we learned in this chapter because it got the wheels spinning about world building and lore and some possible foreshadowing. So buckle up, guys, because again, there's a lot of interesting things to note. To start the chapter, we check back in with Aelin, Adian, and Lysandra, who after a week's travel since the meeting with Darrow had now reached the coastal port town of Ilium. During their travel, it's noted that they pass through many valleys and plains of Terrasen lowlands, and Aelin thinks so little remained of the once rich territory. I feel like this is an awful reminder to Aelin of just how much had changed and how much her people had suffered over the last 10 plus years. This reminder gnaws at Aelin's own guilt for having left Terrasen for so long, but I thought it was touching that she still left gold pieces in her wake to try and help as many people as she could wherever they traveled. Aelin has always carried this guilt with her ever since she was younger, but even despite having grown and changed throughout the story so far, she still blames herself for what happened because it says, but that gold didn't ease the cracking in her heart, that hideous voice that haunted her waking and dreaming thoughts. I'm sure this guilt will continue to plague her until Erewhon is defeated and Terrasen is restored to peace and prosperity, because I think she knows that that's really the only way to truly make things right in the end.
I'm not sure Aelin will ever be able to truly forgive herself. It will probably take decades for Terrasen to truly recover, and I feel like even then the memories will always haunt her. It's truly so sad, but also in a way uplifting because it really highlights Aelin's dedication to her people. I mean, even given how the meeting with Darrow went, she still is dedicated. I still think about that quote where she's like, I'll put my kingdom before my pride. I don't know. Aelin is so great. But it's similar to how, even though it's probably not a good idea strategically, she won't let Otterlanian soldiers desecrate Brandon's sacred temple. She just has this very deeply embedded dedication to her people and the symbols of their people.
We get some world-building information about Ilium that I definitely think is important. It says Ilium is as ancient as Terrasen itself, and it has one very notable landmark that makes it historically important, and that is the Temple of Stone. The Temple of Stone was built around the first rock that Brandon Galathinius stepped on when he first arrived in Aurelia, before he continued his journey toward the Staghorn Mountains. We also learn that the town is currently still under Otterlonian occupation. Aelin and Aedion had entered through the gates and passed the Otterlonian guard, disguising themselves as little more than pilgrims visiting the temple, while Lysandra perched on Aelin's shoulder as a falcon. I also found it noteworthy that Aelin carries Damaris with her, strapped underneath the saddlebags, as well as some ancient spell books. We know Damaris was Gavin Havillier's ancient sword, and by using it, he'd been able to see the truth. And Aelin speculates in Queen of Shadows that the God of Truth, aka the Sin Eater, had also blessed the sword as well. So then I wondered if there will be more uses for it in revealing truths, kind of like how Aelin used it to see the riddle in Elena's tomb in Crown of Midnight. And then later in the Sin Eater's tomb in Queen of Shadows, she uses it to unlock that wall that reveals Gavin's confession that Erewhon wasn't actually dead. Maybe it will reveal something in this temple as well, especially combined with some spell that Aelin learns from her books.
Oh, yeah. We are definitely not done with Damaris or Goldrin. The Goldrin is, just a quick reminder, is the sword she found in the scary cave with the one-eyed freaky monster back in Heir of Fire. I definitely feel like they're both going to continue to be significant either in battle or maybe used in some magical way similar to finding Gavin's confessional in the Sin Eater's temple. Either way, ancient powerful swords are going to be important.
At this point, Aelin reflects on how the little folk had led her here, and this is where we also learn that the Lord of Mia, Roland Havillier's father, had jumped on the opportunity to claim Ilium's port, having been emboldened by Rifthold's recent sacking. Based on the fact that the little folk led Aelin to this temple, I am sure that there's going to be something really important about it. I still stand by my speculation from last episode that perhaps there will be some sort of magical object or like ancient information that is important for Aelin to know historically or like ancestrally speaking or something. So I'm very excited for them to get in there.
Yes, I agree, especially because the way it's phrased in the last set of chapters, where Aelin's like, she knew where she needed to go and what she needed to get or retrieve. There's some indication that there's a very specific purpose for her to be there for.
Aedion is much more cautious, however, about Aelin's zest to take back Ilium and reasonably asks if this is about sending a message to Otterlin or to Darrow. Which, fair, because, knowing how little resources and soldiers Harrison has right now, can they really afford to fight back should things go poorly here? But Aelin will not be convinced otherwise, and I love that she connects back to the power of symbols. She reminds him symbols have power, and I love that this is just a nice full circle moment because Aedion said the same thing to Kael and Dorian back in Heir of Fire.
I will say, I don't know exactly how many soldiers there are and stuff. Seems like Ilium is a pretty small place, so there probably aren't that many soldiers there. So they might be okay. They might be. Oh
they might be okie dokie.
Okie dokie. Might be okie dokie. I feel like Aelin could just burn them all to ash, so we'll see. But regardless, whether it's 1,000,000 soldiers or 10, Aelin ain't gonna abandon this place, that's for sure. It feels like the importance of symbols is going to be a continued theme throughout this book. Erewhon said the same thing about destroying the glass wall in Rifthold, and now we see not only the symbolism of the temple, the Mycenaeans, but also the King's Flower. So it feels like
lots of symbols.
Yeah, lots of symbols.
So as the group checks into a room for the night, this is when we get some super intriguing information about Ilium and ancient people known as the Mycenaeans. So we'll start with the lore that we learn. The Mycenaeans, known to be legendary warriors with a great naval force, had once ruled Ilium as crime lords rather than traditional nobility. And there's a quote that says, and during some long ago war, their lethal fleet had been so crucial in winning that they'd been turned legitimate by whatever king ruled at the time, until they had been exiled centuries later for the refusal to come to Terrason's aid in another war. The Mycenaeans then abandoned Terrason, unwilling to die in a war they didn't believe in, and had not been seen since, and neither had their sea dragons. Last, Aelin also thinks only when the last of the dragons had died, heartsick to be banished from Terrason's water, had the Mycenaeans truly been lost. And only when the sea dragons returned would the Mycenaeans too come home, or so their ancient prophecies claimed. Now that we've covered the history, here are some of our thoughts. First of all, I am curious as to what war Terrasen was involved in that the Mycenaeans refused to fight in. Was this a conflict with the Valg or regular wars between kingdoms on the continent?
I feel like this is one of those things that is either super historically relevant to the Mycenaeans and getting them to come back, or it's not really relevant at all, and it's just world building to explain why they aren't there. Like, you could really go either way.
True. Second, those Mycenaeans are not gone. I feel pretty strongly we will see them and their sea dragons again. And I bet that the creature we see on the cover of the book that you pointed out last episode in the cover analysis is a sea dragon. And more importantly, I wonder if Aelin reclaiming Ilium will serve as a signal, not only to Terrasen's people, but also to the Mycenaeans, that it's time to return and ally once again.
Retweet. As soon as I read this, I was practically vibrating with excitement. Immediately, I was like, how long until the Mycenaeans return?
Now. Come
My
back
sister-
now.
Yes, dude. My sister is rude and has read far ahead of the podcast, and I made her stop because she got to Kingdom of Ash. So sometimes, I mean, she never spoils anything for me. Let me be clear about that. But sometimes I'll be like, when will the Mycenaeans come back? And she'll just look at me and she's like, what are you talking about? I didn't actually ask her about that one specifically. I'm not spoiling anything. Sorry, I just don't want anybody to think I know something. I don't know anything. But it is kind of fun when I like say something and she's like, how could you possibly know that? And I'm like, girl, first of all, it's obvious. Second of all, read between the lines. So it's just kind of fun. I also absolutely now feel convinced that the sea creature we see on the front of the cover is one of the Mycenaean sea dragons. I wonder if they're going to find them on the way to the Dead Islands or once they get there. We know that the Dead Islands is a collection of islands, so maybe they've been hiding out there, but 100% they're out there. They're just biding their time and they're waiting for Aelin Galathinius to come. That's what they're waiting for, and I'm fucking pumped.
They've been waiting to come home, and now they'll get to
Terrasen.
In addition, I think that the fact that Mycenaeans ruled Ilium in a non-traditional manner as crime lords rather than nobles is symbolic of the change in traditional ruling that we see from Aelin, Dorian, and likely Manon as well, in the sense that they are subverting expectations of what traditional ruling should look like. I also feel like, honestly, the Mycenaeans kind of remind me of pirates and Captain Rolfe in a way. And so if they do turn out to still exist and they return, it would continue to feed into this idea that Aelin is gathering allies in an army of all these different types of groups that she's met in her past. And ultimately, like Aelin, it seems like the Mycenaeans have sort of this morally gray history as well. Last but not least, I think the symbolism of Aelin's plan to take back Ilium is so important because it shows strength and hope for Terrasen. I also think that it will send a message to all of the shitty Aurelianian lords, like the Lord of Mea, and any other nobles, that Aelin Galathinius is back and will be holding them accountable for their greed and disrespect towards Terrasen all of these years.
Say that again!
Despite this, Aedion is still hesitant, but ultimately agrees with this plan, although, no matter what, they will still be sailing out by dawn to stay on track and make it to the Dead Islands in time.
The conversation then shifts to another reason Ilium and the temple are important, and that is the King's Flame flower.
Ooh. Aedion says you would be the undisputed queen if you got the King's Flame to bloom again. And you bet your ass the ears perked up at this too. Honestly, my ears and eyes haven't relaxed this entire chapter, but regardless, this is important.
I felt the same way. I was actually listening so hard. I was literally leaning towards my car radio as I was driving so I could hear better, as if that would somehow immerse me further into the story.
Right.
I was in it, man. I was deeply in it.
The King's Flame is a small red and orange flower that had originally bloomed throughout the kingdom the day Brandon stepped foot on the continent. From then on, it became a symbol and a blessing, and if a solitary blossom was ever found, quote, the current sovereign was deemed blessed and the kingdom truly at peace. We learn that the last time a King's Flame bloomed was during Orlan's reign. It was one blossom found in the Oakwald Forest during Orlan's second decade of kingship, and the one before that had been spotted 95 years prior. So I was like, absolutely, Aelin is going to find another Kingsflame flower. But I wonder if it's going to be more like toward the end of the series. I could totally see it being like and at long last, Aelin Galathinius was crowned. And then out in the forest, she finds a lone Kingsflame flower. And then the book ends. You know, I'm just getting like shivers thinking
Oh
about
my
it.
God, Lorraine. Oh, that was beautiful.
Ah!
Okay, but I was wondering about this because I feel like it would be really important for one to bloom for her as soon as possible because it would indicate that she's anointed, blessed, favored,
Right.
whatever, right? But the world building info we get suggests it only blooms if the kingdom is truly at peace. So it seems like it's going to be a while before the kingdom is truly at peace again. So I don't know. I was wondering about that. But either way, that King's Flame will bloom in this series, or so help me. So fucking help me.
So Mala, help us all, yes. Apparently, Darrow currently has Orland's Kingsflame, having managed to grab it before Otterlonian soldiers took it. And to end the chapter, Aelin reflects on how Aedion understood how much power symbols had, having earned back the Sword of Orinth himself. And man, I am psyched to see what happens next, because you know we're going to get some action when Aelin thinks it was enough destruction and pain inflicted on her kingdom. And then Lysandra responds, "We'd better eat before we raise hell."
Yeah. It's just like the night before she went to go rescue Aedion. You could feel it, you know? Yes, totally.
And so, yeah, that now wraps up our analysis. And now we just have some of our favorite moments to end the episode.
So basically, all of my favorite moments were the same as Lorraine's. Like, she finished her notes before me, so when I would go to type them, she'd already written it, and I was like, God damn it, Lorraine. But that just means we have really good taste. We have excellent taste. Basically, all of these, except for I think the last two, are shared. So our first one is when Dorian tells Manon, "Find me when you change your mind, Blackbeak."
Yes.
Yay!
So one of the separate ones that I found that I liked, and this was from Lorcan, actually, and this is when he thinks 4 against 1. Usually easy odds for him. Usually. Because he's like, oh, fuck.
He's like, but he saw those elk and he was like, his bowels turned to water. He was like, this ain't gonna be good. Our next shared one is when it says, Rowan looked back only once as he flew down the little river. The little river. That isn't right.
Little river.
You typed this, not me.
Did I? Oh.
Yeah, because like, that can't be right.
Oops,
oh, no.
my baby.
It can't be the little
Avery River.
No, it says Little River. That's weird. Okay, you were right.
Oh, I didn't.
No, you were right, girl. All right, well, fuck it. All right. My bad. Okay. Rowan looked back only once as he flew down the little river high above the boat, only once at the city that had forged and broken and sheltered his queen.
Oh, closing the Rifthold chapter there. The next one I liked was when Manon thinks about Abraxos. It says she didn't have a heartbeat to spare to marvel that Abraxos had not balked at the fight, that he had not yielded. Her warrior-hearted wyvern. Our next shared one is when they're describing a lead and it says, there were other weapons than those made of iron and steel. Yes. So Such
good.
A good one. The next one I liked was from a lead, and it's when she tells Lorcan, because I am from Terrasen and believe my queen dead, and now she's alive and fighting, so I will fight with her, so that no other girls would be taken from their homes and brought to Morath and forgotten. Alede, my other queen. I love when Alede is channeling her inner Manon Blackbeak, and she says, do not make me reveal what his dark majesty put inside me on the table. And I was like, ooh. I love a Blackbeak Alede. I like this side of her. The next one that I liked was when it said, an undisputed queen of not just blood, but also of legends. Ooh, that's a good one. Ooh, we just got a little shivery again. My last one is, it's when Aedion is talking to Lysandra and Aelin, and he says, I know you two are of the opinion that we males are here to provide you with a pretty view and meals, but I am a general of Terrasen.
And like low key, I was kind of like, oh yeah, Aedion is actually more important than I thought. Like I kind of forgot everything he's done for the last 10 years, and he just kind of follows Aelin around and does what she says.
I know, because she's the queen. I thought that was funny, though, because Lysandra's still, I think, in her bird form at this point. And she's just, like, clicking her beak to agree with Aelin. She's like, whatever, Aedion. Like, and then my last one was Lysandra's line to end the chapters. And it's when she said, we'd better eat before we raise hell.
Lori, I'm going to say that to us next time we're together. We better eat before we raise hell.
That's right.
Love that.
All right. So that now concludes our episode. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booktown Fantasy podcast. As always, we are so glad you found us. So please leave us a review and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube to keep up with us on a daily basis. That's all we've got for you guys today.
So live a little.
And we'll catch you all next week. Bye.
Bye. And stay tuned for some bloopers.
Bitch.
That Isker, that witch bitch. The only thing that rivaled in her...
Filling her?
Yeah, but...
The only thing that rivaled in filling her with dread and terror.
Oh, yep, you're right. Okay, I'm just like, what was I trying to write here? Okay. See, I told you I'm not a good writer. I told you. The red cape used to signify her vicious... Oh my gosh, okay. Let me just take a deep breath. I'm like focusing so hard on not sounding nasally that I feel like I can't think about anything. I can't think about what I'm saying. Okay.
A mighty wind buffeted?
Buffeted?
Was that?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I mistyped that. And it was
I don't think it's
buffered.
Buffeted. So I think it's
well, no, but
buffeted.
I thought maybe I typed that instead of like buffered, you know? I think it was buffeted.
Buffeted to knock someone over off course. Yeah, I mean, it fits.
Okay.
That's a weird word.
Right.
I don't like it. She is more than just the heir to the yellow, not the yellow legs. Heir to the, wait, I forgot. Blackbeaks. Okay, I was trying to say iron teeth. I'm like, no.
So to start us off, we check in with Aelin, Aedion, and Lysandra after a week's travel.
Alien.
Since
you should
the meeting
restart.
with, I know, yeah.